Welcome to the San Ramon Valley Unified School District Board of Education meeting. We want to let the public know that we are video recording this meeting. The recording is being live streamed on the district's YouTube channel. I want to inform everyone that beginning tonight, when there is an action that requires a vote from the board will no longer do a roll call vote where each board member announces their vote. As president, I will call for the vote. The board members will announce their vote into the mic, and I will summarize the vote. We will ask for the student board member vote separately. So with that, we'll take attendance.
Selma Barani, the student board member, present.
Good evening, I'm Laura Brett. I represent Area 3. Welcome back to the new school year.
Hello, thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Rachel Hurd and I represent Trustee Area 5.
Good evening, I'm Jesse Van Zee and I represent Area 1.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Susanna Ordway and I represent Area 4.
Hi, I'm Shelley Clark and I represent Area 2. Selma, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Everybody stand. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. There was no action taken in closed session this evening. So we'll move on to acceptance of minutes. We have minutes from the July 23rd, June 13th, June 10th, and June 9th special meeting. Since there were no changes, may I have a motion to accept the minutes from July 23rd, June 13th, June 10th, and June 9th? So moved.
I'll second.
You have a second? All in favor?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
You were not here for any of those meetings, so we will, okay, so that passes 5-0. Agenda approval. May I have a motion to accept the agenda?
I make a motion that we approve the agenda as written.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Student board member? Passes 5-0. Now we're on to the consent agenda approval. Consent items are considered routine in nature and are approved by combining them into a single vote. Only a member of the board may request that a consent item be removed from the consent agenda to be considered and voted separately. The public may comment on a consent item before the board approves the consent agenda. I don't think there's any. No, I don't think there's any cards for that. So may I have a motion to accept the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion to accept the consent agenda.
I'll second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Student board member?
Aye.
Passes 5-0. All right, so I'm going to do some housekeeping and then we'll move on. I'd like to take a moment to review how public comment works during the board's public meeting. If you would like to make a comment during the meeting, you can find the yellow speaker cards on the table by the door. Please speak to a staff member if you have any questions. You will have an opportunity to make a comment on agendized items when they come to that part of the agenda. For comments on items not on the agenda, please submit your card at 10.1 public comment for non-agenda items on tonight's agenda. Each speaker has a time limit of 3 minutes with a timer shown on the screen while you are speaking. This time limit will be enforced to ensure fairness. Please be aware that we may interrupt you and redirect you to the correct time to speak if your comment relates to a different agendized item or if it is not within our jurisdiction. As president, I reserve the right to announce a last call for speaker card submissions. Please have your speaker card submitted when public comment begins for the agenda item you'd like to comment on. The views expressed during public comment are those of the individual speaker. The absence of a response from the board or district staff does not imply agreement. The district believes in an inclusive, welcoming, and safe environment during its meetings for all of our community. Be mindful that students are in the room and watching virtually. Maybe not tonight because they're still on vacation. We are all here to support them and to support their educational experience. Thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate your engagements. Now we'll move on to reports to the board. And so we have 10.1 right into public comment. The first comment card is Anthony Mitchell. And after him is Mike Arata.
Good evening, council, board members, president. My name is Anthony Mitchell, and I am the president and founder of Echo Green Solutions. We represent a program that's sponsored through the Public Utility Commission for school districts. It's strictly based upon energy reduction. That's sponsored and paid for through a program funded by Pacific Gas Electric Company. I'm here tonight because you guys have done a lot of work over the years. We've seen that bonds have been passed since 2012. And as of this last year, the state just banned all fluorescent lighting throughout the properties and all properties throughout California. Every time the school district pays a utility bill, about 10% of that bill goes into an account that's controlled by the Public Utility Commission. My firm has a contract with those entities to get those funds back from the PUC and spend them back on the district. And so I'm here tonight just to request an information gathering time, because most everything we do has to go to council and the boards for approval. And we would like to just schedule a time to come in and sit and talk about the funds that are available that can help either compensate or add additional funding to your budgets. There is no money out of pocket or no budget impact for the funds that we represent for each and every one of your schools. Each school is eligible for up to $4 million per campus. Not only is it for energy reduction, but for every dollar that you reduce, the Public Utility Commission would also do a dollar for dollar match for anything for EV charging, which a lot of municipalities don't have the money for now, especially with the changes in budgets and administration. Or they'll give you an additional set of funds for battery storage to complement some of the solar systems that you guys have throughout your campuses. So you're already paying into this program. Our job is to basically work with the entities within the K through 12 school districts, work with their facilities and staffs, do site assessments. This is kind of similar to the Cal Shape Prop 39 stuff, but it would be complementing to what you guys are already doing. And so by all means, we don't want to reinvent the wheel, but there are lots of dollars for you guys to take advantage of. And so I'm just here today to ask for that time to see if we can get together with the business officers or the facilities directors to be able to at least inform you guys as to what's available and then help you guys get through that process. Usually it's about 20 or 30 minutes per campus for us to basically of your time or the facilities director's time just to open things up so we can do our assessments. And then what happens is we come back with a very detailed report that typically is funded after there's a very basic application process, which is non-financially binding. So just because of the financial climate of the day, a lot of school districts that we're working with and cities, including the city of Walnut Creek, that's the closest to you, city of Pinole, and several other school districts, depending upon which direction that you go. But we work with a lot of them throughout the years, and we've been doing this since 2007. And so this program just started about 2 years ago. And so there's funds available for you guys today, and we're just here to help. So thank you so much for your time, and we'd love to try to connect with you guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, Mike Arata.
I recommend that any families with children watching at home remove the kids. I'm going to read from some district library books. Attentive parents and other taxpayers recognize that SRVUSD programs and practices present an intellectual, attitudinal, and spiritual hazard to the students in your charge. In short, a moral deficit far more consequential in the long term than your fiscal deficit. I recently received a public records response, which included a mother's politely deferential but denied request from 2.5 years ago for removal of 3 Doherty Valley Library books, citing obscene contents to make her case. One book both narrated and pictured the author's adventures with dildos, vaginal slime, and other sexual encounters. The mom's second book, cited book, among other sexual narratives, portrays a 10-year-old boy's enjoyment of oral sex with an adult male. As the mom observed, this book depicts and normalizes pedophilia. Both of these books are among the 15 already exposed in board meeting readings of over 100 pornographic books on district library shelves. In the mom's third-sided book, a novel not yet exposed in board meetings, not in the top line here of what's on the sign, there's a Black teenage girl who's repeatedly violated by her father. Quoting from one such episode, "My clit swell up, think daddy. Daddy disgusts me, but still he sex me up. I nauseous in my stomach, but hot tight in my twat. And I think I want it back, the smell of the bedroom, the hurt. He slapped my face till it sting, calls me names, pump my pussy in, out, until I come. I want to say I'm a child, but my pussy popping like grease in frying pan. He's slamming me again. His dick soft. He starts sucking my titty." By the time the concerned mom appealed to Superintendent Malloy, she'd already heard Doherty Valley librarian Allison Usanet just the night before at a board meeting declaring that library materials are chosen for artistic, historic, and/or literary strengths rather than rejected for weaknesses. Professional training equips us to consider criteria such as the reputation of the author, overall quality and accuracy, currency and age appropriateness of the content, and value to the collection, unquote. But Doherty Valley's library even supplies a depraved novel in which an investment banker graphically describes his sexual threesomes and his sadistic murder of the females involved, along with his vicious killing of random homeless men on the street. Along with library porn, students here are confronted by so-called equity programs, as detailed in the bottom portion of the sign and exposed at srvexpositor.org. These include flagrantly racist versions of anti-racism, queering of the classroom, their term for it, not mine, favorable portrayals of transgender psychosis, grading for equity, and the latest, ethnic studies, which winds up formalizing DEI lessons. Parents of sufficient means should help their kids to join the exodus from your schools. Parents whose time and/or resources do not permit that should do their best to counteract the district's pernicious influences on the children.
Okay, we'll move on to association presidents' reports. Tammy Castelluccio, CSEA president, is here. I don't see any of our other union partners.
Good evening. I'm Tammy Castelluccio, president of CSEA. Welcome back from what I hope was a wonderful summer break. CSEA and management have been going through reopener negotiations. We've been meeting the last few months. We have not finished quite yet, but are very close. We're hoping to finalize everything by the end of this week or early next week. We have had some hard conversations, but as we always do, we work collaboratively and eventually reach tentative agreement. I want to thank the district's management team and the CSEA team for continuing to push through the hard work for our employees. We do appreciate all the hard work. After reopener negotiations are finished, we will be starting full contract negotiations. We're anxious to get started, but we will let the school year start. Our hope is to bring a sunshine proposal sometime in September. We wish everyone a great start of the school year, and we're looking forward to bringing our students back. Thank you.
Thanks, Tammy. Good to see you. Student board member, do you want to report on your summer?
My summer's been great. I guess students have all been out for summer break, but something related is that the roster for the Student Senate is in the process of being selected, and hopefully we'll have that finalized in the upcoming weeks. So excited to meet them all and excited to continue to work with them.
Welcome back. Superintendent's report.
Thank you very much, President Clark. A few things just to report. Obviously, it is summer, which is a slower time for some, but the busiest time for others. I had a great chance to meet with our talented student board member in preparation for this meeting. Look forward to continuing to meet with her throughout the year. We had a wonderful management retreat last year at the Black Hawk Museum. And in my first year in the district, we focused on building personal and authentic relationships across all of our campuses. That was the focus of our leadership team. We carried forward the next step of that, and we really focused on using teamwork and working better together as the collaborative, as a collaborative group to be our competitive advantage against other school districts. And we focused on some of the work that Lencioni has done in terms of how to build the best team, how to have a team that's functioning at the highest level. I think it was a great day for our managers, classified and certificated. I appreciate the board committing the time to be there as well, and our labor partners who joined us for the morning, as well as our office managers. I also want to shout out that I'm looking forward to, it's one of the things I love every year, is offering some remarks at the new teacher orientation Thursday. It's always fantastic to see a new group of talented teachers come on board to start the year. We'll have another group of talented individuals that is usually our largest of the year for our classified orientation. I look forward to being at that event as well. And I just wanted to close my remarks today by taking a moment, and I'll probably do it again in August, to thank the staff that is working across the district this summer in the district office, our clerical staff, our technology staff, our maintenance and operations staff, our custodial staff, who are all doing so much this time of year to make sure that when we open up for school on the first day, that the facilities are ready, the technology is ready, that employees are being hired, processed, put into payroll, benefits activated. There's a lot that goes on in the summer to make the school year a successful start. And I'm really grateful to all the classified employees who do the brunt of that work throughout the summer. That concludes my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Kamick. Okay, so we're on to 11.1, consideration of adoption of resolution number 31/2526, approval of provisional internship permit requests. Assistant Superintendent
Yes, thank you.
Melanie Jones.
Thank you, President Clark. This is a standing item that we have quite frequently, and this really allows our educators who are still working on meeting all their subject matter requirements to go ahead and continue their work in the classroom while they're working to meet those requirements.
Okay, any questions? Can I get a motion to approve the PIP?
I'd like to make the motion to approve.
I'll second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Student board member?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries 5-0. 11.2, consideration of approval of memorandum of understanding between Measure J Traffic Congestion Relief Agency, or TRAFICS, and San Ramon Valley Unified School District regarding the expectations and responsibilities associated with the implementation of the traffic student transportation service. Superintendent Kamick.
Thank you, President Clark. This is coming for your review and approval this evening. It is something that we do about this time each year. And we are grateful for this partnership and this program. And I know we have Trustee Brad and Trustee Hurd who sit on this committee as part of their work. And so this is just the formalization of the agreement between the agencies.
Okay, any comments, questions, anything you want to add?
Pretty business as usual.
Yeah, okay, so.
Yeah, and I just want to take a minute just to say thank you to Kelly Fahey and to the board of directors and everyone that helps and all the drivers and stuff. We've had a really good year and a lot high pass sales and some new routes. So
Yeah, they did something clever by combining two underutilized routes, so we can provide one more bus for Monte Vista.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So can I have a motion to approve 11.2?
I'll make a motion to approve 11.2.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Student board member?
Aye.
Carries 5-0. 11.3, while we're clipping through. Consideration of acceptance of the FIGMAT fiscal health risk analysis, and we'll turn that over to our Assistant Superintendent of Business Services, Danny Hillman.
Thank you, President Clark. I'll go ahead and read the introduction and then introduce our two representatives from FICMAT who can go through the report. So due to the district's qualified budget certification at second interim, which is back in March of 2025, it was noted by the County Office of Education that they would initiate a visit from the Fiscal Crisis and Management Assistance Team, FICMAT, to conduct a financial health risk analysis to study the financial and budgetary conditions of the district, including but not limited to a review of internal controls. The FICMAT team conducted their fieldwork at the district office the week of May 19th, 2025, and are here this evening to discuss the final report with the Board of Education and the community. I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to our two representatives who conducted the study, Jennifer Noga and Aaron Lillibridge. Welcome.
Welcome.
Should be good. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So I just want to say good evening and thank you for having us to present on the FHRA that, as he stated, we were out here in May. This agenda is just some of the topics that we're going to discuss tonight. I will let it know we are not going to go over every of all 20 sections. We kind of picked the top, the high risk, top 6 for your district. And so we're going to touch on those. That does not mean that you can't ask questions about those 20 sections because we do have it here and obviously we are here. And so feel free to ask questions on any of the areas in the report. So again, thank you for having us here. The report may seem a little outdated. We were here in May. It's based off of your second interim, which was approved in March, as Daniel said. But I think it's still going to be helpful to you and the district staff. It identifies areas of weakness, and those weaknesses have a direct impact on a district's fiscal insolvency. So just a little history on FCMAT. We were actually legislatively created over 30 years ago. So we are a state entity. We work with school districts and local educational agencies from charter schools, community colleges, TK through community colleges. So both school districts, county offices, and community colleges. We are an external independent state agency. We're not a county office. We're not a school district. And so we are brought in from an outside perspective and look at the district's fiscal solvency based on all of the standards that we've created over the years from our experience with districts that have had fiscal concerns. While most people associate us with fiscal crisis, it's actually the smallest part of what we do. Most of the stuff that we work with is kind of management assistance. That's when a school district calls and asks us to come out and do some type of work. Processes and procedures, maybe HR and business don't necessarily know how to put together the right processes and procedures, who's responsible for what. And MYFP, right? They might want a second opinion. And so we go in and do that. So management assistance is a higher percentage than the fiscal crisis. And then we also do a lot of professional development throughout the state. And we also have created software that the school districts use, Projection Pro, as well as CalPATS. Those are all kind of under our umbrella. Sorry, I'll forget to say something if I don't have it here. So again, we were created over 30 years ago, and it really came down to a district that went fiscally bankrupt. And so they created Assembly Bill 1200 to strengthen the fiscal oversight for school districts, because how did this happen, right? And so over the years, that's evolved. And so establishing statewide frameworks, every school district is required to do the adopted, the first interim, cash flows, like everything is consistent throughout the state. And so that's just something that we work with. The county office too, their oversight and collaboration between the county offices and ensuring that they're doing the same thing with their districts. It's just kind of keeping everybody in the fiscal oversight kind of equal. To step back though a little bit, the first level of oversight starts at your level, right? So when the district staff is putting together the budgets and they're coming to you with the assumptions or with items to approve and not approve, basically when you're approving the adopted budget and the other reports, interims and adopt in the unaudited actuals, right? You're the first level because you're elected as a fiduciary responsibility to the district. And then the next level of oversight is the county office, because they get all of your reports and then they review them based on the kind of the AB 1200 oversight guidelines. And so there's layers of protection that went into all of this. So over the years that FCMAT has been around, we've identified kind of 20 different key areas that have impacted a district's solvency. And so underneath each one of these 20 areas, there's multiple questions, and they're all weighted a little different. We go into it a little bit later, but these are just 20 different areas that have been identified to lead to a district's insolvency. So not going to name them all. They're in the report. But again, just there's a lot of different areas, right? It's a lot to manage. It's a lot to look at. But very important to make sure they're all being kind of focused on. So just a little bit about the fiscal health risk analysis. Again, legislatively created over 30 years ago, but as the years go on, right, we need to evolve and see how we can kind of do things better. And so there's been about 4 different bills that have impacted us. The latest one was the 2018-19 State Budget Act that implemented a little more proactive intervention from FCMAT. And so with that came the fiscal health risk analysis. And so under that, there are 5 different criterias that require us or that will trigger us to come out and have to do a fiscal health risk analysis. So if your adopted budget doesn't get approved by the county office, if you have a negative interim report certification, if you have 3 qualified interim reports, and in your case, it's bold, if there's a downgrade of any of your interim reports, right? That's the trigger that happened here. Or if there's a lack of going concern. It kind of sounds backward with that, but basically if there's a lack of going concern moving forward, that if the county sees that there's an issue moving forward, then they can take a district as a lack of going concern. And so that instantly brings triggers for us to come out and do a fiscal health risk analysis. The FHRA, as I said, each one of those 20 areas has questions. There's over 138 yes or no questions. The report, we try to get these out as soon as possible because of the importance, right? The risk. Usually when they're triggered, it's because there's a need. And so because we try to turn these around, we only reply to the no answers. So when we look at the documentation, it's not just a question, right? So some of the answers or some of the questions, you can know the answer by asking a question, but we always verify based on the documents that we review. So we triangulate basically everything. Just one answer isn't going to give us a definite answer. We go back deeper into our analysis to make sure that we have the right answer. But you'll see the ones that are checked yes means that the district is doing what's to our standard necessary. And so only the no's you'll see that have the responses on them. In your case, your score was about 38.7. So it's a moderate risk. However, the report states that you're high. And the reason for that is because of that trigger, those 5 triggers that I talked about earlier with that downgrade, you're automatically triggered to be high. Because we do have districts that ask us to come in and do fiscal health risk analysis without any of those triggers. So they just want to know their risk score and find out areas or where they can make improvements. And there is no district that is perfect out there. Every district has room for improvement. So, but that's the one limitation kind of the score is everybody instantly goes and sees the high, but you're really in the moderate risk and not in the high risk. It's kind of like a golf game, right? The lower the score, the better. So again, to kind of talk about what Danny said earlier about the second interim. So the county, Contra Costa County Superintendent of Schools obviously downgraded the second interim report from positive to qualified based on that 13.7 million, as you guys know, was in the budget, but not kind of a set plan, right? I mean, kind of a plan, but not a set plan, right? And so that's what made them a little uneasy. So again, that's what triggered us to come out. And then I think in the third out year, there was another deficit. And so you just want to make sure that you have the 3%, right? So you have the 3% in all the 3 years. And so that's the one thing without that 13.7, I think it was a little concerning to the county office on whether or not you had that reserve. So your FHRA results, again, I kind of talked about it already. April 25th is when I think FICMAT was first notified. Your high ranking score, again, high ranking, it's moderate because the score is 38.7, but high because of that county office letter. Off of the second interim report, which seems kind of old right now because you've already done your adopted. If not, soon to be doing maybe the 45 revision because of the adopted budget or the state budget. So I know it seems a little outdated. We did conduct interviews on the week of May 19th through the 22nd. We do not just meet with the business office staff. We met with business office staff as well as department and school site staff, principals. We met with board members and we met with the 3 union representations as well. So we really want to get the feel from the whole district. And so make sure that everybody's voice is heard. So again, from our perspective, we don't tell you how to fix it, right? The FHRA is just risks. We don't come in, we're looking at processes and procedures and the weaknesses in those processes and procedures. So we don't come in and tell you how to fix the problem. We tell you where there's weaknesses in your processes and procedures. And so that's really what our report is about. Areas that are functioning well, like I said, with the yes questions, we don't comment on. Sorry if I'm talking too fast, let me know. And so again, for our result in the top areas that we thought were important to kind of talk and bring to you, this page is really, you can kind of pull it aside or maybe you've marked it. I guess you didn't get this beforehand, sorry. If you want to follow along in the presentation, these are the areas that rated the highest. And so these are the areas that we're going to kind of talk about today. So budget monitoring and updating. I'm going to read the slide to you. I guess the most important thing that you want to get out of with the budget monitoring and updates is to make sure that it's as up to date as the information that you know. So when we look at the documents and the budget reports, we want to make sure that there's accurate revenues, there's accurate budget in line, the actuals to date are in line with what's budgeted, and that the expenditure, kind of what's been spent and what's remaining, isn't negative. And so as you progress through the year, your budget should be your best estimate on how you're going to finish the year. And so you really shouldn't have a lot of variances through at the end of the year when you're closing the books, right? If you're staying up to date on all of that. Some of the budget revisions kind of unfortunately fell with the timing of when the collective bargaining agreements were settled. And so it was a tough one, but you want to ensure that if you have the collective bargaining agreements that you're doing those budget revisions within 45 days. And then the budget blocker. So typically when you have budget in a line, you can purchase items. If there's no budget, then you shouldn't be able to purchase in that line, right? Or it should trigger a budget adjustment. And so for this district with the software that it's using, there's a budget blocker and it can be turned on and off. And so it's just a matter of putting it in place or not putting it in place, right? It's just safeguarding and ensuring that there's budget in line. Cash management. So you have bank accounts, you have an internal reconciliation process with those. You have a lot of bank accounts and the documentation that we received just didn't show clearly when they were being reconciled. It's important. You need to make sure that they're being reconciled and reconciled timely, especially if any of them have to do with cash with the number of possible ASBs and everything that you have, right? The cash flow projections, it was really a discussion between everybody on that one. So you guys have a county office that lets you, trying to think of my wording. They let you recognize revenue that's not necessarily received yet. I think it's the county treasurer. So for us, what we're looking at when we're looking at a cash flow for FICMAT's purpose, we want to see a 2-year kind of minimum. Do you know your cash position? Because insolvency is about cash, right? So even if you're negative, you're not necessarily insolvent on paper, because if you have cash and maybe get out of that, then you don't necessarily go insolvent. But if you run out of cash, you can't make payroll and you can't pay your vendors. That's insolvency. So the important thing that we need to watch with the cash flow when you're bringing it to your guys' attention, there were a few months that showed that your cash flow was negative. And we know that's not the case because you're able to pay bills. So because your county office allows you to recognize dollars that you haven't necessarily received, all we're asking is really to be transparent, right? And to kind of include that in the presentation of the cash flow and recognize that that cash is available, right? The county office knows about it, the treasurer knows about it, everybody knows about it, everybody's on the same page. So it's just transparency, because when you look at it, it looks like you're negative. And that's really not what you want to tell your community, because that's not the case. And so, yes, pulling it out of the financial system may be that, but you have this extra kind of security blanket, right, that your county office gives you. And so I was just recommending to the staff to really recognize that and be transparent about that, and to do the 2-year cash flow, because the biggest risk of not knowing your cash is the time. So you have to ensure that you have enough time to make a plan in case you do need to borrow. If there ever becomes a time where that kind of safety net isn't there, you're going to need to have enough time to go out and borrow. And that takes time. So there's usually kind of a 4 to 6 month leeway on that one. So knowing your cash position as a total is important. Did I want to add anything? Oh, and we're also entering a period of apportionment deferrals, right, with the state budget. And again, with those deferrals and knowing how those deferrals are going to impact your cash flow. As the state goes through their crisis, the districts feel the pain of that. And so knowing your cash position and making sure that you're accounting for that and just knowing exactly where you're at is important. Deficit spending. This one's a hard one. Deficit spending is just like your own bank account, right? You can't spend more than you're receiving. And so if you have this much in revenue and you're spending more than that, then you're dipping into your savings account. And so if that continues year after year after year, that savings account is one-time funds, right? The revenue might go on and on at the top, but your savings account is one time. So you're only going to be able to do that for a short time before it impacts you in that 4th and 5th year, which then becomes your 2nd and 3rd year. So just understanding and recognizing how much revenue you're receiving and spending, not overspending what you're receiving. Recognizing the one-time revenues and not paying for ongoing costs, and ensuring that if you do spend the one-time dollars, that there's a plan and everybody's aware of the plan and it's communicated. Again, kind of transparent. The other thing that I would say about this is kind of the county office with their position on that 13.7. You know that you're going to have to make reductions. I think in that case, instead of kind of being positive, because you aren't necessarily positive in that situation, right? So self-qualifying is okay. So you don't have to be positive. Being positive isn't like perfect, right? Submitting a qualified budget admits, hey, we have some work to do. And so recognizing that and acknowledging it, right? You don't have to put dollars in there if we don't necessarily have a plan for it, and self-qualify. Say, hey, we have some work to do. You're talking to your board, you're talking to your community, you're talking to all of your educational partners on that. And so self-qualifying is not a bad thing. It's taking the ownership, right? We know there's something, we know we have work to do. This one kind of goes along with the deficit spending, right? It's your current year, your general fund. So just to highlight, your salaries and benefits for your general fund are 92.5 of your budget. That leaves very, very small percentage for paper, pencils, you know, utilities, just everything. It's a very small percentage. The statewide average is 86%. And your prior years, you were at 91 and 92.3. So we're going kind of the wrong direction in that these are all people that you feed every day, and it's your people, and it's really hard, but it's just recognizing that you are at 92.5%. So that's a huge risk for your district. And your restricted programs, be sure you're charging all the full amount for the indirect. Because there's a cost of doing business in every program. Special ed is one of the biggest programs. People are like, well, it requires a contribution from the district. Why would we charge indirect? And I know it's a really bad example, but let's say special ed gets fully funded some year. And if you're not charging your indirect to that program, which is a full cost of doing business, they have an obligation to pay for a portion of the superintendent, the business office, utilities, everything, right? And so that indirect cost and that rate is created for a purpose, and that's to apply to all programs across the board. And so you really want to make sure that that indirect is being charged to all programs.
All right. Okay, I'm gonna wrap up here our last couple sections. Starting with the internal controls and fraud prevention. So not uncommon to find risk here, because people come and go, process and procedures change. This section added about 3.6% of the risk. And basically what we're looking for, and when we talk to everyone, is we're looking for some real basic controls. And so we heard about some inconsistencies, mostly in accounts payable, a little bit in cash collection. And so you're just such a large district. You may have compensating controls in place, but you do have a large business office team. And so we want to just make sure that some of those basic things are separated. And that's it's not necessarily an easy fix, but it is something that you can address, I think, fairly quickly. Also, you guys do have good processes in place to maintain your access to your financial systems. But we just wanted to see that there was a review of that process annually, right? So you do have this kind of cool technology system where folks are getting added and taken away with changes in employment, but when you're onboarding or when folks are leaving, but we just want to make sure that system works. So we're looking for the annual review, and that's essentially what we're missing here. Also, not uncommon, we ask almost every single person, not necessarily every person, but we ask a lot of people about how would you report fraud. So you guys may feel like there might be some kind of reporting hotline, but we aren't hearing about it in our interviews. So you may want to look at that. So what we've learned, we're both certified fraud examiners, and what we've learned over the years in doing our fraud audits is that just even having a very visible hotline so folks think that there's an awareness of a cultural sort of awareness that fraud exists and that you guys aren't going to tolerate that, and you have an easy way to report it, goes a long way to deter fraud, because you are a very large district. So and you can't have eyes in every single corner, right? So that's just one other thing that we noted that I wanted to highlight. But you're not uncommon. We very often mark no's for those two questions. In terms of collective bargaining agreements, we had quite a few no's here. A lot of this area, what we're looking for are a few things. One is timely settlements, right? So anytime we're talking about risk, financial risk, uncertainty is a large factor that contributes to the risk. And so when we see districts that have trouble settling or doing retroactive type things, that increases risk. So there were a few no's related to the timeliness of your settlements. We have a question that is, do you quantify the cost of your settlement correctly? And we do know there was an error last year, which definitely impacted your bottom line. So these are things that we kind of just check for everyone. Also just we look at the size of the negotiation and we do a really rough back of the envelope kind of analysis there. So are you negotiating at or above the cost of living adjustment? Remembering that if you, let's say in a year, get an 8.22% COLA, that may not translate to an 8.22% financial increase, right? We have declining enrollments, right? So there are impacts to that. So we do kind of a back of the napkin analysis there. So we marked that as well. So this is kind of again, this all of your sections were kind of in the mid threes that we're highlighting today that contributed mostly to your risk. And this one was about 3.2. So, and then leadership and stability. I really thought you know, you guys are in a unique role. So if we were doing this in a couple years, this would be lower, right? We'd probably only have 1% in this section, but you do have two key positions that we analyze, your superintendent and CBO positions. And actually, I kind of thought when we were doing our interviews that we could mark yes, just because of the history that you both have in this district. Clearly, you're not new here. But you are new to the roles. And so unfortunately, we did mark no, and that's basically what's contributing to most of the risk in this section. The other thing I will say is you are a large district, and so I'm assuming you have turnover in key positions of principalships, even assistant principals, things like that, department administrators. And so you really do want to have some sort of, you know, training system for those folks when they have a budget that they're managing. You want to be able to give them some support so that there's an accountability at that level. You're unique in the sense that you have these very large educational foundations, and your principals and are very much, they're all very well spoken about finances, but we just wanted to see some training for like new folks that maybe haven't come into those roles. Something a little more formalized is what we're looking for there. So next steps, again, we just basically hope that this tool can help, you know, your business leaders to kind of prioritize some improvements, and then there are issues in this tool that frankly, like you can't necessarily fix, right? So if we're in a declining enrollment, that's creating risk because our funding is going to decrease accordingly. But what we want, and we're never going to be at a 0% risk. It's really just, it's kind of like your medical checkup. You go in every year, you check all those basic indicators to see how you're doing. And so we would actually recommend that you do this internally yourself. Maybe every year your business leaders can take a look, see how things have changed. Because obviously we've talked about some big areas like deficit spending and your reserves and fund balance levels that you're going to need to increase again, especially our fund balance, right? We don't want to be just at 3%. So as you're making those tough decisions and you're continuing to work through your financial challenges and making those tough decisions with your community, you can kind of revisit this tool. Because obviously those are the sections that contribute the most to your risk. So I think we've reached that. So happy to take any questions. I know we went through everything really quickly. The report really speaks for itself, but we're happy to. But in case we missed something,
Any questions? Go ahead.
So I know that this report, you said it was in May, so it was before we had come to agreement with one of our union partners. I'm just curious if how much of an, I know you can't really give a number, but how much of an impact generally did, or how much of a shift in our score generally post reaching that agreement, or was a lot of this score kind of regardless of having an agreement or not?
So your subsequent event that we recognized in the report still happened in May. And so the county office still would have downgraded the second interim. So as far as I think the score would have been the same because of that.
Yeah, and I think you guys still have an operating deficit, correct?
Yeah.
And so most of while you have that, until you address that, most of the questions would still have been no, because we look how have you been doing, and you have been spending down your unrestricted general fund balance, and then we look forward to, right, like into the future years, you're still projecting to do that. So I don't really think that would have changed the score. It might have kept us from coming in.
Okay.
Yeah.
One of the things you mentioned was having the county downgrade us versus us giving a qualified certification. what are some of the parameters, I guess, that you would give to us as a board of looking at that of, you know, what are what are the kickers or the triggers for us as a board starting to say, maybe this should be qualified?
I think that kind of comes from your internal staff. Again, when they're bringing the budget to you, right? This is everything that we've talked about, everything that's in the budget, which you guys should be talking about, should be aware of. So if it's included in the budget, you've either approved it or you haven't taken action yet. If it's something you have not taken action on yet, or it's not settled, don't put it in the budget. So again, the 13.7, yes, we're gonna make those reductions. We don't know what they are yet, but we know as a board, we're committed to making those reductions, but there was no definite plan or how, right?
There was like a resolution for it, but not necessarily it wasn't in plan, right?
Yeah, if I may, I think that is one of the challenges, right? Is our partners in FICMAT described. It's that balance of, did we have a resolution passed? Yes. Did we have a budget reduction plan? Yes. But the largest bulk of our scope of reductions was related to one bargaining unit, which was unsettled. And so I think the premise is, when we look at our budgets, knowing that they are projections and assumptions based on the best information that we have, at what point are we going too far in the risk category of saying, we still believe that these reductions will be accomplished? And for us internally at the staff level, and our recommendation to the board at the second interim was not only a hope and belief that we would reach an agreement with Serbia, which was the last remaining agreement that needed to be solved, but also understanding that through the negotiations process, there is a point in time where we could have, if we needed to, unilaterally impose reductions. And our perspective in the certification on the budget was that did remain an option, obviously an option that none of us wanted to do, but it did remain an option. And when the county looked at that, their perspective as the body that has to approve our budgets and is in many ways put under a microscope if our budget goes negative, was to say, that's a little too much risk than we're comfortable with at the county level. And so hopefully we aren't in that position again where we need to make such drastic reductions in 1 year. And I think always good feedback for us to consider, as you saw Mr. Hillman present the budget for adoption, and the reason we'll be here for the 45-day revise is we showed a slide in that presentation that talked about, based on school services recommendation, what we should and should not include in the adopted budget based on the risk of those assumptions. So I believe we included the COLA, and that was about it, because everything else was, given the budget negotiations at the state, still too risky to build in. So it's a little bit of that.
I agree with you 100%. I think also I'll just add that when you step back and you just look at the certification definitions, positive means that you will be able to meet your financial obligations for the current and 2+ years. Qualified means you may be able to for the current and subsequent years. And so I think anytime and especially if it's in your next subsequent year and you're already that far into the school, into your base current year, and you're looking at the subsequent year and you need a significant amount of reduction still, do you think that's a will or a may, right? And so I would just go back to the actual definitions that way. Plus, some districts are even more conservative and they look at that second year. And if they're not going to meet their 3% and they have unspecified reductions in there, they may be very conservative and go qualified. Some will put in an unspecified reduction, stay positive because they're aware and they're taking accountability of it. So it's really your district's perspective as well.
So you could keep the numbers in there so the math works, so you can see where do we
What
think
you
we're
need.
gonna be, but it's how you interpret the question of may.
Right. And so I think, again, every county has a different tolerance level too. I think in some counties, they wouldn't have let you go at first interim positive, right? So it's just, and every district has a different tolerance as well, but just going back to the definitions and deciding, you know, what you're comfortable with. And you guys have strong leadership that really gets the stuff.
Yeah.
So, yep.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
We do have one comment card.
I
I
take
have
more questions. I don't know if you
Okay,
want to do that.
okay, go ahead then.
Well, I was just, and this is, I may be for Danny, I was just curious about the point about multiple, I think it was 30 bank accounts. Is 50. Sorry. Is that more because we've had, I mean, since I've been on the board, we've had you're our third CBO. Is that more because of just, trying to catch up with turnover, or is that a common practice that maybe we need to revisit, or?
No, for us, it's that's about what we've had for years now.
Oh.
And it's about the number of accounts we have at the school site level and other, so that's not new. That's not something we've added. I think the feedback is that we do have a reconciliation process that we can improve on. And it's actually in my notes in case this question came up about some of the things we've already implemented for this year. And so while we have that process, the date wasn't super clear of when the reconciliation was happening. And so that was one of the pieces of feedback that we can add a field. We use Inform K-12 for this.
Mhm.
And so while there's a date stamp on it on the electronic side, it isn't clearly identified in the form of when the reconciliation was done. And so that's something that Evan and I have already talked about doing, and he's on vacation this week. But when he comes back next week, we have a list of things that we're going to be taking from the report that go beyond the part of the report that was very time sensitive and may not be as relevant now. There's plenty in this report that is about process and best practice. And so we have the list and we're already implementing some, like the budget blocker one as an example. So as far as the number of accounts, that's historically about how many we've had. That might be more than what other districts typically carry, but that's kind of what we've done for years now. That's not new.
Okay.
I had a question, and this might be for you, Danny, is on when you were talking about the 2-year cash flow versus 1-year cash flow management. What are we currently doing, and is there any takeaway on our side of thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a very unique situation because in Contra Costa County, the treasurer's office essentially, I think they partake in the teeter system, which essentially allows for, as the analyst said, essentially they credit to us tax revenue they haven't collected yet. They assume it's coming in. If they bill individual taxpayers, they just said, well, we're going to get that. So we'll let the district have their money. And they allow us to credit it before we've received it from local property taxes. That's not unique to us. That's not unique to school districts. They're doing that across the entire county. So that's something that the treasurer's office has allowed for. I think we might be the only county in the state that does that. You guys see more counties than I do. But until they change that system, we can go ahead and look at cash flow 2 years out. At the end of the day, it's a good exercise. It's a best practice, as was discussed. It would give us a preview into, hey, 12 months from now, we might be low on cash. If we want to do a trans or a borrowing system or go out for something, we would then know well in advance. We've never had to do that because the county credits us the apportionment like ahead of time. So we can do it. And Evan and I have talked about this. So it's on our list. It's on our list of things to do. Is it top priority? I would argue I would rather look at some of the fraud things first and about strengthening our internal controls around AP and AR, accounts payable, accounts receivable, because that's where I see something potentially happening before cash, but we'll still do the cash and we'll look at it. It just hasn't been a priority in this district because of the way the treasurer's office organizes things. So we'll check it out.
Yeah. Fair.
I have a question about employee benefits, and the question was about the verification of determination of eligibility for benefits, that we hadn't done one within 5 years. Is that something that we actually already know and we don't have to do that to know that? Or is it something that we just haven't caught up on?
I think the recommendation was to go through and do a top to bottom every single employee analysis. And one of the things that we do is we look at it when something changes. So employees are being looked at if they elect to change to something different, or they want the cash in lieu instead, or they'd rather be in Kaiser, or if they're making a change, it gets looked at then. What we have not done since COVID is looked at, give me the full report of every single employee in the district, and let's make sure that the benefits that are being paid on their behalf and or their family, et cetera, that everybody is still eligible. I don't think that we have a lot of errors there. But again, recommendation is to go and double check that. It's the trust and verify method. And so what we need to do is put that on the list of actions for this year. it's in my notes, is one of our goals for 25-26 is to take that recommendation and implement it. And then on a regular basis, continue to have that review. So the first lift will be a little heavy because we haven't done it in a while.
Right.
But that's going back several years. And frankly, you may remember, our former director of budget who retired but came back during COVID and got us through before we hired Evan. That may have been one of the last times that we did that. And that was right around COVID. So this goes back to another comment you guys made about, attrition with staff and people leaving and people coming on, and how do we make sure that they get trained? And so that's one of the areas we can get better at.
I think given the cost of healthcare, it's worth it for sure. Anybody else?
Yeah, just one thought on that, and then I have kind of a question for us to ponder. But where I work for University of California, and they actually do more of like a lottery type of thing that every year they tell you someone may contact you, and so you kind of, and so then they kind of scrub that way rather than all this. But it's a huge institution. Just a thought to kind of ponder, and I know there's no answer to it, but it's worrisome, I think. So the fact that we are now at 92.5% for people cost, and we also are one of the lowest funded districts in the state, and we are I mean, do I say an elite school district? I mean, we are like a high performing school district. So, kind of a gold standard in terms of, that, but yet we're kind of riding this line, and we're continuing to move kind of closer and closer to that edge of, when do we see ourselves as a poor district? Like, I mean, right? Because we do not get the funds to be able to support the type of educational environment that we are creating. We do not have the funds to support that. So at what point do we, I don't know. I mean, there's no answer to it. It's a rock and a hard place, but it's with each year we get closer and closer to it. And we just about went over the edge this last year, barely scraped back from the edge. And so do we rethink the choices that we're making, how we pay for what we want?
And that's why I think that zero-based budgeting exercise,
Right.
which is going to
Yeah.
have a long on ramp to get accomplished correctly.
Right.
I don't know, CJ, it looks like you want to jump in on that.
No, I think you're right. I think the other part of it is, when do we consider ourselves a district that's poor, right? I mean, I think all districts that are in declining enrollment, unless they're a basic 8 district, every other LCFF district that's in declining enrollment is in a similar predicament. We happen to be, I think, in a worse predicament because not only are we in declining enrollment and have we been in declining enrollment for a number of consecutive years, we're in the bottom 4th% of the state in what we receive under this funding model. The other piece is an analysis of where are we paying for certain positions. So can some of those positions go to the restricted side of the house? That becomes a challenge for a district with our demographics because our restricted side of the house is very small.
Right.
And so there's a lot of factors that go into how we consider that. Another piece, remembering that we made significant budget reductions for this year. That percentage may look dramatically different because we have far less people working for us this year. And as we continue to right size our staffing to align with our declining enrollment, we have to monitor that percentage to see how much of that is still in the unrestricted side of the house.
Right. So potentially that increase in number could be because we haven't right sized more so than because we don't have enough money to pay for what we want.
Well, I would say it's
Both.
both, because in declining enrollment and where we fall with LCFF, that's a major problem for us.
Yeah.
And we may also have to look and consider how, and Danny may be able to speak to this a lot better than I can with his expertise, but we receive tremendous community support at the local site level through our ed funds that staffs a number of positions, which really supports our students in our programs in our schools. And I don't think those would qualify on the restricted side. I don't know, that may be something that we need to analyze as well, because that is a great benefit provided to us from our community, which I think is a unique aspect of our district compared to others in our situation.
I think the last question that I have is, FICMAT team was talking about, increase in settlement time increases risk. So as we go through these negotiations, the longer they draw out, the higher the risk that we have. So from a strategic standpoint, if we're going to keep having long drawn out, settlement times, does that, what buffers that a little bit? Is that increased in reserve? Or does the settlement time stand alone as just a risk?
Yeah, I think it's more the latter. I think it's just that the, especially when especially when we go into a district and we do see this where they're not settled for multiple years, that becomes very troublesome, right? When you are settling at the end of a year, there's a rush to get things done, get people paid. Sometimes errors get made that way. That's a high, anytime we do anything outside of the normal, when we're doing retroactive things, that's always where we have some risk for errors. And that's where we look at internal controls, right, to make sure that things are working properly. But more so speaking, when we're talking, because this is more of a 30,000 foot kind of review of risk, we're more so talking about just the longer that uncertainty is out there, the more, there's a risk to that. That's essentially what we're measuring there. Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Anybody else? Okay, Mike.
Back in March, referring then to your second interim financial report, I compared projected full-time employee count for the upcoming 2025-26 school year with that of 10 years ago. Since then, you've published, of course, an adopted budget for the new year. Viewers now should note first in the upper right corner of the corresponding new sign that you now have and still have about 4,500 fewer students now than 10 years ago. It's a 14% reduction. Next, viewers should focus on the lower right corner of the sign. You have cut back a little further in your FTE count than in the numbers you showed in March. But in total, you still have about 1% more employees than 10 years ago. 14% fewer students, 1% more employees. That's a structural problem to begin with. Breaking things down, you now have non-management certificated staff, i.e. teachers, counselors, librarians, further reduced in number from March, but still a reduction of less than 8% from the 2015-2016 school year, again versus 14% fewer students. The numbers went from 1,606 to 1,490 for certificated, so it was a reduction, but again, disproportionate to student numbers. Meanwhile, you still show substantially more non-management classified employees now at 972 than in the spring, 836.6 then. And you still have 6 more management level employees than you did 10 years ago. And so even with your anticipated reductions in force now, you still project more full-time equivalent employees now than 10 years ago, 2,577 versus 2,552 back then. Again, about a 1% increase over 10 years ago. And again, with 4,500 fewer students now than then. 14% fewer. Presumably, you're retaining or hiring a disproportionate number of classified employees because, one hopes because, to save money, you'll be doing substantially less contracting out. And I think there has been direction of that sort. But even then, the disproportions still jump out. Even with your purported $26 million in cuts, your expenditures, mostly involving salary and benefits, as you said, 92% of the budget, your expenditures will still be $100 million or more ahead of the combined effect of inflation and enrollment reduction over the last 10 years. Taxpayers should understand that SRVUSD created its own budget crisis with disproportionate salary and benefit increases over time, disproportionate especially when one takes a look at CASP state test scores. I would take issue, and again, as a former teacher, as many of you know, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, I take issue with the notion that this is a gold standard district academically. The facts are up at srvexpositor.org. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Thank you very much for all the work that you did to try to help us, and we appreciate it. You brought to light a lot of things that we need to look at, and I'm very confident that we are and we will. But we appreciate you coming in and giving us this lens to look through. It's important, and I think it was a good thing wherever we were actually, but I appreciate it. Okay, so can I have a motion to approve 11.3?
I'll make a motion to approve 11.3.
Second?
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Student board member?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Okay, on to 11.4, consideration of adoption of resolution number 35/25-26, approving 45-day budget revisions due to adoptions of the 25-26 state budget. Mr. Hillman.
Okay. Thank you, President Clark. I'm going to go ahead and jump into the presentation. I wanted to start this off first by acknowledging the fact that we don't normally do a detailed presentation at 45-day revise. That hasn't really been necessary in the past. The reason why we chose to do it this time was twofold. One, because of the district's current financial position and how we ended things in June. There's been some movement, happy to say, in the positive direction. And you'll be able to see that here in a second. And then also there's been quite a bit of new news and updates coming from the federal government and some of their actions, as well as just the economy generally speaking, that we don't normally see at this time of year. We normally would bundle all this up and bring it to you in the fall, as the governor and his team are starting to highlight and telegraph their priorities for next year. But we felt it was important to do that today. So if you'll bear with me, I do have some slides to show on this, and we'll also get to the individual details of the 45-day revise as well. So tonight, I'm going to go over the economic outlook for 25-26, the federal actions that I mentioned earlier, as well as the state budget and what they ended up approving. Just quick highlights there and some changes to Prop 98 that we need to be aware of going into this new fiscal year. And then, as I said, our numbers here in San Ramon Valley. Okay, so here we are. This is the purple square is where we are within this fiscal year, 25-26. You adopted the budget in the green box at the 12 o'clock position on this chart, and we are now at the purple, and then we'll move on to first interim. That'll be back in December. The economic outlook, so just to summarize, some key things that are happening is some revised labor market data from the Department of Finance. This is California specific, this is not federal. But unemployment is holding steady right now. However, they revised their jobs number for the end of, for the first 4 months of 2025. 50,000 jobs were lost per the Department of Finance. That is a trend we don't want. I'll get into that in just a second, although you can probably put two and two together and figure out why. Also, the impact of some of the federal policies on immigration are starting to constrain the labor supply. We're starting to see that in some of the metrics at the state level. California's GDP is expected to continue trending downward for the short term. I have a couple charts on that to show you. Domestic migration, meaning people leaving the state of California for other states, is actually slowing, and the Department of Finance is showing that we may actually see the state population grow slightly over the next couple of years. That is a reversal of a trend since COVID. That's a good thing for us because typically some of those individuals will be school-aged kids, and hopefully they come here or stay here. Inflation, California's consumer price index is projected to peak at 4.2% by the end of this calendar year. And then housing continues to be troublesome. It is not sparking the economy like it sometimes does in California. The state is trying to free things up, make things easier, some new policies, but there's an implementation lag with regard to some of these policies normally. And in this current environment, it's taking even longer for some of those policies. You probably saw some headlines recently that the state was changing the CEQA requirements to try to incentivize developers to build homes. That hasn't been officially done yet, but it also is going to take some time for that to actually seep in and for people to want to take the risk to build. Also, we know that interest rates are staying high. So let's just talk about GDP for a second. Here are the latest numbers. You can see very clearly that we got through the annual year of 2024 with seeing growth pretty much through all 4 quarters. The first quarter in 2025, however, seen a slight decline. So this is not a recession. No one is talking about a recession nationally or in the state, but this is the first drop in GDP in several quarters now. So that is a little surprising. Essentially for California, the first drop since Q4 of 2022. So it's been a little bit of time. That's something we're going to want to keep track of and listen to the updates from the Department of Finance throughout the year. Here's the labor market projection. The dotted green line is the California unemployment rate, and you can see that the Department of Finance is projecting that that is going to increase over the next few quarters. You can see it's always typically higher than the federal unemployment rate. That's just the way our economy runs. But that slight uptick is a little concerning because if you have fewer people that are employed, that means they have fewer people pulling a salary, which means fewer income taxes are collected. So all of these things on the margin start to add up. Here's the detail on the labor market. So originally, the LAO had just recently published an update to these numbers, and the job growth that they had predicted for the last quarter of 2024 actually became a decline. And so that's one of the key data points I just wanted to point out is that it's not that it didn't grow as much, it actually went down. And so that change with the change in the GDP for the state, these indicators are still starting to point the wrong direction for continued growth in the state. And so that's why I wanted to highlight them. We typically don't get this kind of data at this time of year, as I mentioned. Just another fact point. The stock market, this is specifically the S&P 500. This is only the last couple of months, but it does show that some of the things that happen external to the market don't seem to be affecting the market like they used to. So that's interesting. It's curious. It's good for the state of California for reasons you may remember. A lot of the personal income tax that is collected in the state of California is capital gains tax. Capital gains goes the direction that the S&P goes. So if the stock market is doing better, education in California tends to do better because of how things are funded. So this is something that we try to watch. It's nice to see that it's high. It's nice to see that certain statements or policy decisions at the federal level don't seem to be spooking the market quite as much, but we will wait and see how that all unfolds. Obviously, tariffs are directly related to economic growth and profitability, and we will see if any of those new tariffs, if they come into fruition, or if they get changed or augmented, how that hits companies' bottom lines over the next several months. So through the end of 2025, we're going to be watching this closely. This is a summary. The analogy of using the weather app on your phone from school services, but basically mostly cloudy. And so this is specific to the state's budget condition, not ours. But the state is still spending money they don't have. So they have a structural deficit just like we do. The state is doing the very thing that they tell school districts not to do, which is to use one-time money to pay for ongoing costs, but they continue to do so. The thought of tariffs, the threat of tariffs, however you want to think of it, is spooking some projection people at the state. They're not sure what kind of an effect it will have. They anticipate it being a negative effect on state revenue, but to what degree, they're not quite sure yet because it depends on how all of those tariffs with the different countries ends up landing. There's also this thing to be aware of where if the federal government decides to not fund something that is a collective priority of our lawmakers in the state capitol, they will want to try to pick up that item and continue it. And so that's a tension that we have to be aware of, because if they decide to pick something up that they don't have the long-term ability to pay for, they could do something like the governor did this year, where they don't pay education fully. They hold some of the money back and they use it over here on the non-education side of the state budget. So that last bullet bubble in the bottom right corner is actually pretty important, because the more things that are threatened or get cut at the federal level, expect to see a lot of discussion at the state level about, do we continue that? And if so, how do we do that? That will create essentially some waves or some potential risk for our local budget if state funding for Prop 98, which is our funding, gets changed. So just something to keep an eye on. That just summarizes most of what I just said. I'll skip it. Here's a summary of the four kind of buckets of federal actions that have recently occurred. I will say that in the time we went to print, the far right-hand side of this slide is no longer on the table. The federal government did release the federal funds that had been originally withheld, so I'll skip the fourth one and just go over the first three. We have a slew of executive orders. We have a budget proposal that the White House has made. And then, of course, the passage of HR 1, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, does have some changes for the state of California and thus for us. So there's an ongoing effort to dismantle the Department of Education. That, at this point, you can see the update here. It started in March, but in July, we did have the Supreme Court that ruled that the layoffs at the department could continue while the case about whether or not the executive branch has the ability to close it continues, but they can do the layoffs in the meantime. So that's the update there. The federal education budget for 2026, the non-defense spending proposal would reduce spending by 163 billion from the current levels. Across these bullets here, it would eliminate adult education and eliminate Title III, but would maintain Title I and Individuals with Disabilities, IDEA Act, as well as it would simplify the K-12 funding program and consolidate $2 billion for 18 formula and competitive grants. So it's reshaping what the Ed Department does, possibly under a different department completely, but these are the priorities that the executive branch has laid out. HR 1 made a change to how tax credits for scholarships, for federal school vouchers, but also it makes changes to the eligibility for Medicaid and SNAP. That directly affects school districts in California because the state of California, essentially for sake of ease, decided to use the free and reduced lunch application for eligibility across a bunch of different programs. And with HR 1, the federal government has now said that application can only be used for some things, but not all the things. So the state's going to have to change their way to process those applications, which then changes how many kids might be eligible for some of these programs and get the benefit. So this is in flux. We don't know exactly how this is going to affect us. All of these federal things will affect us less than some of our neighbors. I want to state that right out of the gate. Our federal funding is about $7 million a year, 2 to 3% of our overall budget. That is far less than some of our neighbors to the north and to the east. Sorry, west, it's that way. And east, actually. But they still affect us. And so we are tracking these things. We're aware of them, and we will have to probably change some of our internal processes to make sure that our families who are eligible for certain things continue to remain eligible. We might have to reach out, might have to ask them to do some different forms because these new rules will affect that. And as I said, this one is now off the table, this slide here. The federal government did release the federal funds for 2025, so this is not a thing anymore. And neither is this slide because we had about $550,000 that had been frozen. That was our share locally here. And we had a way to cover that until and if there was a resolution, but we don't need to do that. So I'll skip this slide too. Let me tell you what the state decided to do. The proposal that was officially put into the California state budget was a $1.7 billion student support and professional development discretionary block grant. Here are the different bullets that the state said you could use it for these things, but they also said districts could use it for whatever they wanted. So for us, this is about $8.5 million. It's about $315 per student per ADA. And these dollars are pretty much already earmarked with our bargaining agreements that we made in the spring to close out the effects bargaining from the budget reductions. So this one-time funding pot that we can spend until 2029 is already earmarked, is already some of it's already spent this year. And for a couple of the groups, it's eliminated some furlough days. And for one of the groups, it brought positions back onto the books for the 25-26 school year. The second thing that we got confirmation on was an existing block grant that the state added more money to. This one goes all the way back to COVID, and we were trying to reopen schools. This one, you may remember, the pendulum swung a little bit. There was a huge allocation, and then the state clawed some of it back, and now they're giving it back to us again. So this is about $300,000 for our district, $114 per ADA, but it's based upon the ADA back in 2021-22. So it's kind of an interesting little nuance. So we have until a couple of years to spend this. Once again, we will have it spent down by the timeline. We won't have to send any money back. I'm mentioning that because I think you probably saw in the FCMAT report, the FHRA, we did have one program where we had about $100,000 in ELOP money, the Expanded Learning Opportunities Program. We couldn't spend it fast enough. We had to send it back. But that's 100,000 of millions. So the rest of the program we were able to spend fine by the timeline. So this grant here, we have it earmarked and it will be spent down by the funding deadline. As I said, 300,000 for our district. And then this is the new ongoing funding. This is approximately $2 million more for SRVUSD. This changed the amount of the ratio for LCFF for TK. So for each TK student, we're getting an additional $2,400. So the total amount is $5,500 and change. And that is an ongoing LCFF contribution. And so that will help us out as our TK program hopefully continues to grow. All your TKers, please come and join us. And so this is an ongoing thing that we can bank on as long as the numbers stay where they are. So for this current year, $2 million has been added to our revenues, and I'll show you where that hit our budget in just a second. One thing I wanted to mention about Prop 98 is that the governor did something unique this year and the legislature approved it. The first column shows you the suspended level from 2023-24 of what the state, the calculation of Prop 98 was for schools. That was the 98 billion there. That went up in the 24-25 year to 119.9, but you can see that they've only allocated 118 of it. So they are withholding $1.9 billion. They're pulling that back and holding it back as almost a cautionary just in case. That's what I'm calling it. I don't know what they're calling it. But that settle up they're holding back because you may remember that because of the LA fires, they have extended the tax deadline to October. And so we won't know the true revenue collections for that county, which is the largest GDP county in the state and in parts of the country too, until late into this calendar year. And I think they did this as a safety so that in case those revenues fall short, they don't have to owe us a bunch of money. So worst case scenario, the Constitution says what it says, and they will owe us that if in fact the revenues come in the way they thought. We'll get it eventually. They haven't decided how they're going to pay that settle up. That's the little red bar there on the top. So the state did withhold some money from Prop 98. Therefore, K-12 education, K-14 education has been shortchanged by about 1.9 billion. Okay, risks to Prop 98 and local budgets. On the far right side here, you can see the kind of dotted arrow. What we're trying to show here and what school services summarized, I thought most eloquently, frankly, is the Proposition 98 amount and the change from the previous years in the dark bar, and then the peppermint stick colored bar is the state revenues. And so you can see the pendulum swings a little bit back and forth, and for the most part, they're going together. So if you have 2 down years, you have 2 up years. But I wanted to show the out years because based upon all of the somewhat economic uncertainty that we're experiencing mid-calendar year, middle of 2025, they've projected a 3%, a 3.4%, and a 3.3% COLA over the next 3 years. But I'd like to point out that the projections for revenue and the projections for Prop 98 don't keep up with that. So over that 3-year period, it could fluctuate, but in the first year, 2.5%, but the COLA is 3%. The year out, it's a 3.4% COLA, but a 5.8% revenue increase from the previous year. So in order to fund the COLA, they've got to have enough revenues to do it. And so there's a little uncertainty here about whether the projections are going to come true. We don't know that until we get closer. But again, it's something to watch because if the GDP falls in the state, or unemployment goes up, or prices go up, these numbers fluctuate. And when they fluctuate, it changes our outlook. It changes our future here. And as you heard from FCMAT, we have to do a 3-year projection and multi-year projection. And our multi-year projection is going to be based on those 3 COLAs. The only thing we know, almost with a certainty, but we don't know the exact number, is that we'll continue to have declining enrollment. So even if a 3% COLA comes true, we will get 3% on fewer students, which means less revenue overall. So this is the precarious position that we find ourselves in. Again, it's somewhat not of our making. Declining enrollment districts are all experiencing this if they're an LCFF district. But there's a little bit of a cloudy outlook here, going back to that weather app thing. And it's a little bit more hairy at this point in the year. Normally, we don't have this kind of risk this middle of year. And so it's why we're highlighting it for you. We want to make sure it's on everyone's radar, and we'll be able to provide an update down the road. Speaking of declining enrollment, just to show that this isn't an us only problem, this is the statewide numbers predicted by, I believe, Department of Finance. You've got the K-12 number there, and then you have the green line, which is K-12 excluding TK. So TK is helping. You can see that the line flattens a little bit with the full implementation of TK as a new grade level, but the overall trend is still downward. So if the out migration from California could turn around, if people could have more children enrolled in schools, this would all be wonderful. Again, please come here, not to our neighbors. But again, these are trends that are beyond us. This is not something that San Ramon Valley did wrong. It's just the effect of a lower birth rate over several decades. This slide is more for informational, but it basically shows the top 20 counties and how they're experiencing student enrollment. And you can see that there are many that are falling, and you can see the percentage. It's also worth noting that percentages, comparing them can be tricky, especially when you're comparing Tulare County with Los Angeles County. A drop of 1% in Tulare versus LA is a totally different number of kids. So remember that LA County is our most populous county. They have millions of kids. So anyway, just wanted to highlight that. Okay, our numbers. Let's talk our numbers. So this format is the same format we showed you in June. We've added the blue column. So the adopted budget is from June 17th meeting. And you can see right out of the gate that our overall revenue has gone from 442.5 million up to 453 almost 6 million. So that's $11 million more. We show you there in the change column where the change occurred. We have $2.1 million more in LCFF. That's the TK add-on. The $8.9 million in other state revenue, the vast majority of that is the new discretionary block grant. So 8.5 of the 8.9 is sitting in that line right there. There's a few other dollars, like the 300,000 from the learning recovery block grant is also in the other state revenue line. So you can see what that does for us in revenues. On the expenditure side, because the majority of that 8.5 million was earmarked for positions and furlough days to turn those around and bring them back on our books, you can see that we have certificated salaries, classified salaries, and employee benefits all increasing to the requisite agreements that we made with each of the bargaining units. So if you do a quick look at this, our revenue went up by 11 million in the last month because of what the actions that the state took. And based on local decisions here, we've increased our expenses by 5 million. So when someone looks at that and says, hey, you've got 6 more million, you need to give us that, or you need to do something with that. Please remember that the rest of that balance is for the next 2 years of the agreements that we have with our groups, and that those monies are earmarked already per bargaining agreement. So we don't have $6 million to spend. We have $6 million to hold on to spend each in the next 2 years. So just if people are doing that rough math, they may not see that or not realize that. This does not show you the multi-year projection. We won't have a new one of those until we get a few more months into the year. Typically, our first official multi-year projection will show you at first interim in December when we have several months of payroll under our belt, and we also have the unaudited actuals completed. What I would like to highlight between the June at the very bottom, the net increase decrease to fund balance, is instead of having an overall net decrease between restricted and unrestricted of $6 million, we now have a positive balance of 89,000. Boy, 89 million would be great. Sorry, I added a couple zeros there. $89,000, which I'll call flat. That's good. That means we didn't take anything out of our fund balance to make these expenses work. We are at least within the year. At this moment in time, 4 weeks into the school year, we are balanced for this year. Now, will it stay that way? Things are going to change. They always do. We're only 1 month in. But I would rather be sitting in the blue column position than in tapping into the ending fund balance by 6 million. It's also worth noting that $6 million negative or 6 million of overspending was really coming from the restricted side of our ledger. It was not coming from our unrestricted ending fund balance.
Danny, can I ask a question if you can
Sure.
go back? There's a heading in the expenditure row where it says unrestricted, restricted, and combined. Isn't it supposed to be adopted
Yes, sorry.
I sat there looking at that going, what?
No,
And then I realized when I got to the next slide, it was probably just a typo, but
My
just thinking
apologies.
before we post it, we might want to fix
I
it.
will fix that. Yes. So to clarify, under expenditures, middle column, it should not say the word restricted. It should say 45-day revision. It should match the revenue headers should all match. So I apologize. That's typo. So the next slide though is correct with unrestricted and restricted. So this is giving you the updated budget detail from that blue column. We've separated it out into unrestricted and restricted and then recombined it on the far right-hand side. So you can see the detail of where these funds live, where the expenses live, and again, what it does to our bottom line. So on the unrestricted side, we actually have a net increase to our ending fund balance of 1.9. That makes sense because we added $2.1 million in unrestricted revenue. So that about squares. And then because we got an $8.5 million grant plus another 300,000, you took a negative of 6 million and you now have only a negative of 1.8. I mean, this is all headed in the right direction. This is what we want. So these numbers we don't have SACS forms to file. The 45-day revise, you use your own local format. And so we're using this and the items that are in the board agenda to delineate where we plan to put these revenues and where we plan to put these expenditures. Okay, so ending fund balance, this is the blue area here in the center. So you can see that we revised for 25-26. Our beginning fund balance is just over 1.1 million. We've increased it by 1.9. We now have an ending fund balance of 3 million. On the restricted side, we're still dipping in to pay for things, but that's okay because we're using restricted dollars and we have to spend some of that stuff down. So overall, you can see that we've assigned a $2.6 million amount to the assigned area within our ending fund balance. If you wanted to go back and compare, that dollar amount in June was about $500,000. So when you add the 2.1 and the new TK money, that's where it goes. We have not identified an expense for that, and I don't want to yet, and you'll see why in just a second. And then at the bottom, just reiterating what our Fund 17 balance is. This is where we keep the reserve for economic uncertainty. That's the 3%. So 13.4 million is still 3%. And then our declining enrollment, we have a little bit of extra money in there to dip into in case we have to. So combined with the ending fund balance, the blue area, plus the 13.4, plus the 5.1, that gives you 4.69% in our overall reserve. And just to give you a comparison to June, it was 4.2 something in June. It's gone up to 4.6. That's great. That's the right direction. It has not moved the needle beyond just 0.5%, but that's about where we are. I've updated this chart for the record, I guess, for people to see. The yellow column is where we are right now at 45-day revise. Again, $2.6 million there in the red type. You can see a little bit higher than our ending fund balance in 24-25. And again, if you compared that to June, it would have said 500,000. It now says 2.6. And again, I did not update the orange columns because we haven't done a full MYP yet. It's a little too early to do that. But the yellow column is updated for the numbers that you just saw in the previous slides. To talk about reserve balances for just a second, here's the statewide average data. These three break out an elementary district versus a high school only district versus a unified district. And you can see the percentages there over the time frame. Since COVID, when districts received a lot of one-time money, reserve balances went high. They on average went up, 4 to 6%. And you can see that districts over time have spent some of it down, but they still have quite a bit, averaging still 22%, 24% reserves. Our reserves are not that high. So I use this as a data point only. I'm not suggesting that we need to figure out a way to get to 22%, but I would like to propose something maybe a little bit more reachable. And so given some of the bullets here, looking forward, we have a low level of reserves currently. The significant amount of uncertainty in the economy and the volatility in areas outside of the district's control, staff is recommending saving beyond the minimum reserve for economic uncertainty that's required by the state. And we think by doing so, that will enhance the district's financial picture and our financial standing. We would throw out there for a conversation, but it does not have to be discussed or even acted upon tonight, but for a future conversation to create a board policy locally to San Ramon Valley that establishes what I'm calling a strategic reserve. And I use the word strategic because it aligns with the strategic direction of stewardship of resources. The idea would be to build back our reserves over time. We would not be able to get to, and you kind of instead of burying the lead, look at the bottom right corner, a 7% reserve. Take the 3% required reserve of the state, add 4% to it. We're not going to get to 7% overnight, but we take the time to build back to a number like 7%, a combined reserve that takes the state requirement, adds in the strategic reserve, and the board gets to decide what happens with that 4% at any given time. If they want to dip into it, you guys take an action, resolution, we uncommit it, you can spend it on something if you want to. But without having a little bit more than, and in this case, double the amount of the minimum, we don't have the time, we don't have the on-ramp to deal with an uncertainty that I can't predict or that we can't predict. 7% reserve or something even different or higher, if you would like to do something higher, I'm all ears. But a 7% reserve gives us more time to respond to things. A lot of what we're dealing with is out of our control. It's not about a lack of spending or we didn't have a certain meeting on a monthly basis. That's not what's causing where we are. It's declining enrollment. That's out of our control. A lot of it has to do with economic factors, out of our control, and the way that the state funds us, also out of our control. Most of it is not within our control. So the idea would be to create this, give us a little bit more of a cushion, but still provide the board the latitude and leeway to do whatever they choose with that strategic reserve once it is established. In the meantime, in anticipation of this conversation, I will go back one slide. I lied, 3 slides. And I'll just acknowledge that $2.6 million amount sitting in the assigned general fund, if you gave me the green light, I would start with that. And that 2.6 would be credited towards the strategic reserve. So Evan and I, our executive director of business services, has identified this 2.6. We've specifically put it in an assigned amount so that the board can decide what you'd like to do with it. Our recommendation is that we consider some sort of additional reserve. Okay, in summary, the board approved budget reductions that helped decrease the district's deficit spending. I really want to highlight this because last year was difficult, and it was difficult for staff, and I mean all staff. It was difficult for the board and the community. We had a very comprehensive process that got that more than $35 million down to just $6 million a month ago, and with some additional funding from the state, we're almost balanced for the current year. That is a massive movement in a short amount of time, and I think it's worth noting and saying thank you to all the people involved, because that's not something that just happened on its own, and it certainly didn't happen overnight. It took all year to achieve. And if we want to maintain a balanced budget, it's going to require some additional actions, which I've listed there. These are not new items. Brainstorming new revenues, identifying additional budget reductions, a combination of both, a reserve policy, all of these things help continue to balance the budget and keep us on a financial positive footing. We still anticipate declining enrollment. I've already mentioned that. And then future federal actions in the state economy will be key items to watch throughout this year. I said school year on the slide, but I think the next 6 months are pretty critical. This calendar year of 2025 will be very interesting to watch the data coming out. We'll, of course, provide you those updates when we get them from the various agencies, whether that's Department of Finance or the LAO. But I see this as a pretty critical pivot moment to see how Prop 98 is going to be affected next year. Next steps, this is just a list of our future meetings. Wanted to identify when we'll be coming back with unaudited actuals in September. And then, of course, we will have our first interim in December. I'd also like to highlight that Cabinet, CJ, myself, and Christine and Melanie have talked about having FCMAT come back on our accord to analyze our multi-year projection. They are already doing that work. It'll be the team that you saw tonight. It's a separate job though. So they do the one and then they finish it, report on it, and then they do the next one. So right now we're targeting October 14th for them to provide some feedback about our multi-year projection. And that report's a little different. They will be able to provide some suggestions on implementing something different if they see something that we can improve on. So, okay, I will stop talking. I know that was a lot. I apologize. And I'll turn it back to Trustee Clark.
Okay, anybody have any other questions, comments?
I have a comment. I wholly support your strategic reserve idea. I know we can't take action tonight, but get the conversation going. And I think paired with that, I really think part of a policy should also include a commitment to spending one-time money on one-time things. That doesn't mean that we couldn't do a one-time thing that related to, say, a particular coordinator to work on a particular problem or something like that. But it would be the position or whatever, just as an example, would be created very clearly that it's a temporary thing. And I think where we got sideways in all of this was back to our bridge, where positions that were temporary became permanent. And that is the lesson I think we can learn from the last few years, especially the pain of last year, that we just can't go there. We're too close to the edge for the things that you brought up later. So I would just like to entertain that as like the beginning of something we could entertain.
I think that's a great idea, and I wholly support building our reserves up. I would even go a little higher, maybe than 7%. I know it's going to take a while to get there. And, you know, we're going in the right direction now, but I agree, we can't keep spending. I think all the COVID money that came in really confused and sort of covered over some of the underlying issues, because we had so much that we were trying to deal with, and our students and our staff needed so much more support, and we had the money to do it, and we wanted to do it because of the need and because of the circumstances. So now that we're through that and we see where we really are, which was kind of scary, but we're getting through it, we need to continue in that direction and hold steady to that course, because we struggle so much with trying to compensate our staff and our teachers and all the other, our union partners, all of our staff that work here. And we're in a high rent district, basically. And I think we try to do that and be fair with them, but at the same time, we have to be responsible with what we're spending. So going forward, I think it's a great plan. And thank you for all the other information that you put in there. It's very helpful to get a big picture of where we are and the whole state.
Yeah, and that would throw additional support behind the strategic reserve. I think information that might be helpful, at least for me as a board member, is to get to 4%. What's a reasonable goal as far as like a time frame to get there, and then what would we as a board do to throw weight behind this, that this is actually a directive? Is this a resolution? Is it a policy? What is it that you would need to see from us to give it the most foundational support that we really intend this?
Yeah, operationally, it could be a resolution. It could be a policy, but we could certainly do it with a resolution. And then I think the next step is really just as we continue to review our budget in the upcoming year with zero-based budgeting, right? It's saying, these are the things that we commit to. These are the things that we say are a priority. These are the things that we want to build as sustainable for years to come. And if that's there as a resolution for staff, then that tells us that's a direction that we need to take. In terms of time frame, I think that's going to depend on a number of things, but I would defer to Danny.
I will definitely have to get back to you, because there's the main thing is your expenditures have to be under your revenues for an extended period of time. So how far under? Well, $1 at a time is going to take a while. If it's $100,000 at a time, that gets faster. So you can see the scale of it is going to be the delta, the difference between how much revenue is coming in and how we're spending it. So if the board wants to get there in 2 years, then we probably need further budget reductions to do that. I'm not saying that's what you said. I'm just giving you an example. So I think it comes down to, and it could possibly be a byproduct of something out of the conversation with zero-based budgeting.
Yeah.
Because during that process, we will have gone through every single line item and put essentially a priority to it. And you may come out at the end of that process saying, wow, we've got some priorities that we can actually take care of if we don't do these other things.
Yeah.
And one of the priorities, if it's a reserve of a certain percentage, then we can build a timeline off of that. It all depends on the scale of the dollar you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important that we're having this conversation, and I'm grateful that the board is looking at this as a direction. Because when we look at this 45-day revise and we see what I think is remarkable progress in our fiscal condition in the last 12 months, we cannot forget the pain that has come along with that. But I think we have to also realize that some of this progress that is identified in our budget is the product of MOUs with our labor partners that exist for only 3 years. And so we know that we're going to have pressure put on this budget right away from the fact that we obviously want to restore furlough days for people, right? We're using the discretionary block grant to do that. We want to bring back things that were reduced. We want to find a way to bring counseling back in a longer term because we know our kids need it. And that's not even taking into account how in a very, very competitive labor market, we talk about handling recruitment and retention through benefits and wages. So a lot of progress to get to this point. There's going to be a lot of pressure put on the budget over the next 6 to 9 months. And the importance of having this as a direction from the board as a reserve is that as staff works to manage the pressures of that budget and bring you recommendations, we can hold that as an anchor point. And the other, I think, critical point is, as Danny said, having it as a strategic reserve doesn't in the long term ever prohibit you from using it, but it does make it a much more deliberate act, decision, commitment. And that gives us a chance to weigh that out, discuss that in the boardroom. So it certainly gives a great guidepost for us at the staff level as we start to manage these pressures on the budget this year and next year.
Yeah, and I would add into that too on these. I know there's going to be some, you're trying to look into the crystal ball and the multi-year projections, and there's a lot of the uncertainties that you pointed out in this presentation. But then also rounding that off too with our, revenue enhancements, which I think we've been really aggressive with, and I think strategic with the California Youth Behavioral Health Initiative, other different revenue sources that we've been actively pursuing. So I think too, just it's not all about just cuts, it's growth. And I think we've been very aggressive and we've thought really well outside the box on being strategic on that. And I know the entire board and the entire district staff has been so.
I actually, great you mentioned that because I had a question with regards to the Children Youth Behavioral Health Initiative, because things are from the state level and federal level, right? Like Medicaid, it's getting a little, changes and stuff like that. Would that impact our, what we're trying to do with regards to revenue generations through that particular initiative?
The short answer right now is no, only because we have not taken any revenue projections into the future years. We're not entirely sure what we're going to get in reimbursement. So until we get the system up and running, which we're in the process of, and Christine's team's been really helpful with this, and we have some training that's going on as staff return, we're not going to have any sort of crystal ball predictions about that. We're going to wait and see what we get and then say, okay, is that sustainable? Can we grow that as a base? But we won't know that for a little while now. Okay. And it's also worth mentioning, it is a reimbursement, which means we have to do all the work and then we get the reimbursement at the end. So we're not going to know that for quite a while, even after we start providing those services.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, no, thank you for, comprehensive presentation and report and all the information. As you said, we don't usually get this 45 day revised, but because things have moved, there's so many changes, right? Actually a federal and state level that was very, very useful.
And we are getting the grant committee up and running. Our first meeting is in September. So I'm hoping that it's going to take a while to get going, but that we can generate some funds that can maybe pay for some things that we can't pay for in our budget. So fingers crossed on that one.
Yeah, and I sorry.
Go ahead.
And I think too that just, we've seen in your report and we felt the volatility of the federal government, of this and the reactions from the state government and all of those things in terms of finances. And so the idea of having a consistent reserve is going to help us to ride out these waves of uncertainty that feel extreme right now, but maybe that's the way things are going to be for a while, right? We don't know. So I mean, I think it's important for us to have those conversations because We need to protect the kids. We need to protect the kids in the classroom now too, from that volatility. And we saw that this last year. And so that reserve is actually a protection for the kids in the classroom today, I think. So.
Okay, so with that, can I have a motion to approve 11.4?
I move the approval to 11.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Student.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Okay, so we're on to informational items. 12.1 Ethnic Studies Curriculum Update. Executive Director Deb Pettish. Thanks for hanging out with us all night. Deb and Hong, appreciate it.
Good evening, President Clark, fellow trustees. Thank you so much for having us here this evening. Of course, sitting alongside me is Dr. Hong Nguyen. And we feel privileged to be here tonight to talk about ethnic studies and to provide you with an update on implementation. So this is all a review of information, but I did want to continue to kind of bring this information back to, of course, all of you and to the public as well. So just as a reminder, Assembly Bill 101 was passed in 2021, and that established ethnic studies as a graduation requirement for the class of 2030 and beyond. It also said, and that was, of course, throughout the state of California. It also said that all school districts had to implement an ethnic studies class starting in the 25-26 school year. And that is all information that we've been talking about in this public setting for a long time. The thing that is somewhat new that we had talked about, but that we do have updated information on now, is this idea that the law was predicated on the idea that there would be state funding provided to school districts in order to implement the class. So for things like curriculum, professional development, potentially paying for individual teachers to teach it. That was not in the most recent budget. So therefore, for lack of a better word, the state mandate of having ethnic studies as a graduation requirement is a bit in limbo right now for the state level. With that being said, we of course had already really, I think most districts across the state of California had kind of already had things in motion, of course, to add that as a graduation requirement. So in 24-25, we updated our BP and AR, stating that ethnic studies was a graduation requirement for all students in the class of 2029 and beyond. And that, of course, is the incoming freshman who will be here in just a couple of weeks. So we, of course, updated our board policy. We also think that it is really what is best for students. We do think that it's going to be a very beneficial learning environment. We will learn a lot, of course, with this first year of implementation, but we do think that it's what's best for students. We, of course, also got the course approved and then the curriculum approved in May, so just a couple of months ago. So in May, we said that we would follow up with all of you, and here we are in terms of what we've done over the last couple of months for professional development updates as well as curriculum updates. So I'll now turn over to Hong.
Thank you, Debbie. And as we're going through and really looking at our curriculum, one of the things that we also said we were going to do was professional development. And we actually started doing professional development this past year, but we continued on, especially with some of the feedback that was given. We were able to build that in. And so in June, right after school was out, we were able to bring a team of teachers to come together because they wanted to start the professional development right away. And so we were able to do that. And of course, the emphasis of the professional development is really to dig into the curriculum, but also really emphasize with the group community building. What is that going to look like within the class? Being able to really build an inclusive, respectful classroom, being able to have discourse, having all of those different types of discussions with the group there. And one of the other things that we were able to build in and will continue to build in was we had someone come in to our session through Zoom and was able to really do a nice lesson around, Jewish American history during that
time. And so that was enlightening for our educators that were in the room. I think it was something that was needed, and we wanted to continue that. And so we do have professional development set up for this coming year, a number of different sessions. And so we have 4 on the books right now, and we're bringing back the educator to talk about anti-Semitism in that session. And so that's something that we're going to do during the floating work week that we actually have. And, it's exciting for us to bring the educators that we know now are going to be teaching ethnic studies together. And so they are committed to be able to continue with the professional growth in this space, and to work with our teachers and to really make this class successful. And so one of the things that we also did was we talked to so many community members, right, within this time frame. And I think all of the concerns that were brought up, as well as a lot of comments, positive comments, as well as concerns, were all valid. And so we definitely spent a lot of time trying to hear and listen and really take in some of the feedback that was given, so that way we can really update our curriculum, because we're in a space of really making sure that our curriculum reflects our community as well as our students. And so some of the things that we mentioned that we were going to change, we were able to do in the actual curriculum. I think I've spent a lot of time this summer just really going through the materials and making sure that we were able to make those updates that we said we would. And so we did add in Jewish American experiences, some lessons within that space, and then also anti-Semitism. That was something that we wanted to make sure that we included. And so we were able to do that. And now we have folks that are going to be coming in to talk about that also with our educators. We also wanted to make sure that, some of the presentations that we had, and we know that is going to be something that's going to be ongoing in terms of as we're evolving this course, but we did add in more broad ranges of identities as well as religions. That was something that was brought up. And another area that we wanted to make sure that we clarified within some of our documents that we had, or in the actual course itself too, is that students are not required to share personal information. They can share information that they feel comfortable in sharing in the class. And so that was something that was important for us to be able to do. We did take out one of the videos that was there that we had mentioned at the very beginning in some of our meetings, and then really wanted to make sure that we were still teaching about the history of ethnic studies. So we found another comparable video. We were able to do that. We removed any resources that were irrelevant to the course itself. And then also there was one chapter, it wasn't a required reading. It just happened to be within a chapter in a selected book that we had included that focused on caste system. And so based on some of that feedback, we were able to find that and then also remove that. And then, of course, some of the things that we want to continue to do is respect all perspectives. We know that students are going to be coming in at different places. And so we want to make sure that as we're building this class, that it's going to set a foundation for the school site. And we want to be able to make sure students are seen as well as they feel safe. That was something that is really important. I had a conversation yesterday with the dad that's in the district. And, that was something that he really wanted to emphasize, right? Like, we want our students to feel safe, to be able to come to school, to be in their class, to be able to share and really thrive. And so we want this class to be that. Also, we want to stay and remain nonpartisan as well as policy aligned, of course, really making sure that we're meeting our standards. And then, of course, with this class, at the very end of the course, we build in opportunities for students to give feedback as well as dialogue and reflection, but we also have staff do that as well. And so with our professional development, we'll be able to check in with our teachers throughout to see how the class is going.
Thank you so much, Hong. I appreciate that. And then, of course, our next steps, as Hong alluded to, we'll continue to do professional development that we already have planned throughout the course of the school year. And of course, we will be responsive to the needs of our teachers and our students based on the feedback that we get through this professional development. We will gather feedback from our parents, from our teachers, and most importantly, from our students, in order to kind of better understand what revisions we need to make to the curriculum over time to ensure we're really supporting all students. And then we'll, of course, come back in the spring. I believe it was April, tentatively scheduled, in order to provide you a feedback on implementation. So we would be more than happy to take any questions or feedback that you have.
On the thank you for the presentation. I appreciate that. On the feedback for the students, is that going to be allowed to be anonymous?
that was something that we can definitely build
Yeah.
in. Right now, everything's on a Google form. And so with the Google form, we could
It-
easily turn
yeah.
off that link and for the students to not put in their email address or their information and just give feedback.
Yeah, I would encourage, implementing that as anonymous, because even some of the feedback that I heard from parents during the process, they didn't even speak up about it in general because they were too worried about, I'm confused if I can actually submit this anonymously or not. And it was one of the things where I'm like, I'd rather have the information, even it be anonymous. And I know there's issues with that, but I think in classroom, it's only going out to the students anyway. So it's easier to control it with that. And I think with students, there's such a asymmetrical balance of power in the classroom that you need to give them the voice if we really are going to get that feedback versus hearing about it later after the fact. So yeah, I thank you for implementing that. I appreciate that. My other question is, I've had a lot of questions concerning the non-district course. So in order to achieve the graduation requirements, what sort of information could you provide for parents? I know more about it, but could you provide a little bit more information about what the non-district course looks like and how parents would go to select that for their student if they choose?
Absolutely. If I could just begin by responding to the anonymous survey, we can absolutely do that. I think that is really important for any type of feedback that we get, especially from students. And I think I would add staff as well. So just so they feel comfortable really speaking to what's in their heart. In terms of the non-district classes, so ethnic studies can be taken as a non-district class, and parents will often hear us refer to that as an NDC, right? Because we love our acronyms. So a non-district course, really any of our students can take any of our courses through outside institutions, as long as those institutions are WASC accredited and the course is UC approved. So oftentimes our students will take these courses through like a community college like DVC or some type of online provider like BYU. I'm not recommending either of those institutions, but those are two popular ones that students tend to go to when they want to take a course outside of our particular system. Students are able to put up to 40 credits on the SRVUSD transcript. They can take additional outside courses, but they would have to put ethnic studies on the SRVUSD transcript. So 5 of those 40 would have to be ethnic studies because it's a grad requirement. So we of course need to see it. And so there's 2 different ways that a students could take ethnic studies through an NDC. One is, and a number of people have already signed up, there was a June 10th deadline. But students can still do it. And I'll talk about that in a second. But there was a June 10th deadline. I think we had about 45 students so far who have signed up to take the course through an outside institution. And we ask for this information really early so that counselors can have this information in order for them to plan more effectively master schedules. Because at some of our high schools, like Doherty, we literally have thousands of courses that are taken over the summer that the counselors, when they come back in a couple days, then have to process and update all of those schedules. And it's a huge undertaking. So if the parent and the student filled out a form by June 10th, the counselors will get that information when they come back in a few days, and student schedules will be updated accordingly and ethnic studies will be taken off. If students didn't do that for whatever reason, then what they'll have to do is a course change request within the first 3 weeks of school, like they would for any other course that they want to change out, right? And so all we ask is that people are really patient with our counselors, because again, there's so many changes. There's some errors on schedules in addition to all of these requests of students wanting to change classes. So we just ask for patience, give the counselors some time in order to update the schedule and make those changes. I do want to be clear on the implication of not taking ethnic studies, just to be clear. And this is something that we support all students. If they feel that is most appropriate for their educational trajectory, then we absolutely 100% support that. It's a little tricky with ethnic studies because it's replacing World Geo. It's a 1 semester class that students take, of course, in 9th grade. And they take that course adjacent with health. So 1 semester will be ethnic studies and the other will be health. You might have ethnic studies first and then health, or vice versa. Okay. So what we've noticed, and I think this is a really good sign, is when students who met that June 10th deadline requested to take an NDC and not have ethnic studies on their schedule, many of them also requested health. And that is a really kind of positive development, I would say, because then they have a whole year open on their schedule that they could then replace it with a year-long elective, or they could just take 5 classes and they free up that time at home in order to do their NDC class. They can also just take ethnic studies outside, but then it becomes a little bit wonky because for one semester, they would have a hole in their schedule. Counselors are going to work really, really hard to create that hole either like in the morning or in the afternoon so that students can either come to school a little bit late or leave a little bit early. So that's absolutely doable because we just don't have one semester elective courses really at all, but especially for freshmen. So does that answer your question?
100%. And I think you would probably also want to add the caveat of if you are doing an NDC, just understand that, you know, you have it for graduation requirements. So even though you might not have to do it during your freshman year, make sure you schedule the time to get it done so that you're not scrambling, right?
Thank you. That is so important because we don't want people to think they have all this time and then before you know it, right, the kids are seniors. And so they absolutely 100% have to take it as of right now per our board policy to graduate. There's some wiggle room with regard to when they can take it, but regardless, they have to then, once they take it, they don't have to necessarily meet with the registrar, but there's another form they have to fill out saying that I want this particular class on my transcript. Again, it has to be on the transcript for when the counselors do the review of the transcripts for students to be able to graduate. Thank you so much.
Can I ask, just clarify something with
Yeah.
that? So you had mentioned that if they do PLIs or in whatever for both ethnic studies and health, so they have that period that they can take that off. I thought that it was a policy that ninth graders can't have an open full period to leave campus and so then if they can't leave campus, are we providing space? And what if that's fourth period? And it just wanted to kind of clarify where you were with that.
Yeah, so what we do, that's a really good question. We cannot provide a space just for logistical reasons. We don't have that capacity to do that at our high schools or really at any of our schools as of right now. So what they would do is the counselors would just build the schedule. The students would have 5 periods. And so they would probably either come a little bit late or get out early. There wouldn't be like a hole in the middle of the day.
Right. And that's doable. That's seems like a heavy lift. But I'm just.
It is.
Okay.
It is
just kind of
doable,
thinking
yeah.
about the expectations that a parent or a student might have in terms of.
And I think there's an important note there, which is how heavy a lift it really is. I think where you see the impact of that is how all of the other students' classes may be impacted.
Right.
So the course schedule or the course path that they may want for their other classes may be dramatically impacted because
They need to.
they're taking 5 classes instead of 6. So neither one can happen in a vacuum. And so in order to accommodate the change for the non-district course, especially if it's a student who's putting in a request to change form now, there may be some implications for their other courses that get changed. And so really important to talk to our amazing counselors about what it could mean for their schedule, because if taking it as a non-district course impacts 3 other courses that they're really, really wanting or happy with, there might be some discussion that they need to have with a counselor and their parents and guardians.
But there would be that opportunity for them to take an elective if there's a spot open. And so they could, there's that. It's not like.
If they take as NDC health and ethnic studies, because then we have those 1-year electives
Right.
as opposed to semester electives. And thank you, Superintendent Kamick. That is really important. Those who filled out the form by June 10th, we're pretty confident that we can give them that first period or last period where they can come to school late, leave early. Doing a course change request, if that course is now embedded in your 3rd period, for example, that is going to require a fair amount of movement, potential, fairly large schedule changes. So we do want parents and students to be aware of that.
And then again, just for clarity's sake. So let's say that they've opted out and they get to their junior year and they still haven't taken the class. There's checkpoints with the counselors. So I know counselors check in with students. I don't know. Well, I don't know specifically about graduation requirements until their junior year, but certainly they check in to make sure that they're ticking those boxes off so that they do get to graduation. They wouldn't necessarily fall through the cracks, I guess.
That's correct. I do think this is kind of a unique circumstance, and we're probably going to have to be a bit more diligent because most people don't take too many NDCs their first year for health and
Yeah,
ethics studies. So it's a little bit of a unique situation, and I do think we're going to have to add some checks and balances sophomore or junior year to kind of keep reminding people.
Yeah.
The only other thing, it's more of a comment, and because I really do not expect an answer tonight, because I know this is kind of, fresh information that the district's juggling with, but I've had a few questions on if students do take the required ethnic studies course, but also have opt-outs on the Mahmoud v. Taylor, paradigm. How that works. It's been a question. I'm like, I have no clue. I know the district's actively working on it and looking at these parameters, but I figured we could speak to it.
Yeah, I can speak to that. And for those that aren't familiar, Mahmoud versus Taylor is a Supreme Court case, which just was recently ruled on this summer. And in essence, what it highlights is that the Supreme Court said families' religious freedoms give them the opportunity to opt out of curriculum in a public school that they may find objectionable or that they do not want their children to receive because of their strongly held religious beliefs. The Supreme Court case did not define in certain parameters what religions those were, nor did they define what curriculum that it was, which may or may not be found objectionable. So our staff, as well as districts across the country, I'm sure, but I know in our county, are talking about how do we operationalize this. In essence, while there are a number of, in my opinion, significant considerations for this decision, what it means for equity and for all kids, we are working at operationalizing this, giving notice to parents, and it will create a circumstance where families on an individual basis will be able to opt out of curriculum that they believe is infringing upon their religious freedoms. One of the aspects of the Supreme Court case highlights from the decision itself, and I'm paraphrasing, that it is dependent on the facts of the situation. So the challenge with this Supreme Court case is it doesn't say this section, and this section of curriculum, or this religion, this religion, this religion. It is really going to be dependent. And so we will work on communicating that to our families, operationalizing an opt-out process. And we're certainly hearing from attorneys up and down the state and CSBA on how we operationalize this. The one thing I do want to be clear about is the Supreme Court case does not impact or govern what we teach as a school district. It is only clarifying an individual family's right to opt their child out of the instruction. So we will have much more information to share. I think in a general context, Trustee Van Zee, when we look at that question, it would be, is there going to be an option for families to opt out? Yes, but they're going to have to state their religious belief, and we'll have some forms for people to fill out because it's going to be a complex thing to track. And I think that's the balance that school districts are trying to navigate right now. And we'll bring a conversation back to the board about if we need to adjust any policies on that. We obviously have opt-out practices in place that we've used for years in education. This is just going to, I think, change that a little bit, and it's going to be a lot more nuanced as well.
Yeah, and I think that to the point of all of the hard work in developing and putting pen to paper on curriculum, that actually allows for a framework for staff and for parents and for students to see what the curriculum is. And so that some of the areas that I think we might struggle with other classes, that this should be a good case study in how it works. And the idea that it's the onus is on the family to show the the concern around the religious belief. You know, ethnic studies isn't about religion, it's about ethnicity. So, you know, this is going to be an interesting year and working through this court decision for sure.
I just want to thank you both for all the work that you've done on this. I'm so encouraged and actually really excited to see it get off the ground because I think we had to start somewhere and we got a lot of we got a lot of pushback, we got a lot of positive, we got a lot of information, and you took all that, you listened, and you did something with it important and changed the way that we're doing some of these things. And as we go on, it's going to be really I'm really going to be interested in how the students feel, and I hope I get to visit sometime to kind of observe just what's going on and to see the program in action. But thank you so much. I have never seen so much work and energy and time go into any curriculum that since I've been here. So you have just done an amazing job, and I'm so appreciative of that, and I'm sure our students will be too. Okay. Thank you. All right, so we're on to 12.2, first reading of revisions to board policy and administrative regulations. Christine Huardo.
Yes, thank you, President Clark. Tonight, we're bringing forth the first read of 3 ARs and 1 board policy. They're being brought forth just reflecting current educational code changes and recommendations by the California School Board Association. I did want to note that AR 5113, absences and excuses, we inadvertently left off the last 3 lines when it was brought forth in June, so we added those. And BP AR 5144.1 and 5144.2 are just annual updates that we receive from recent education code and CSB updates.
Christine, does that mean we actually will be approving or reapproving the first one where the 3 lines got left off? We can't take action on that tonight.
We just, to make it easy, brought it forth for a first read for you so that we can do it all together as an approval at the next meeting, just to make it easy.
Okay. Anybody, any questions on that or comments before we move on?
I'll just say that reading about the whole part with suspensions and expulsions is very precise.
Yeah.
And I had some questions that I discussed with Christine today, but on a second read, I kind of answered them myself, but it just the whole idea with the premise of we don't want to do suspensions and expulsions, but in these cases we can if we feel like we need to. And so it was just the use of the words. It really helped to kind of just talk conceptually about how it all fits together because it's complex.
And are we talking to all policies or just specifically the absences and excuses one right now? Are we doing them all or are we doing one at a time?
We've already done everything
Well,
in
yeah.
absences one, so I think
Yeah,
we were
okay, got it.
attaching all of them.
'Cause
My
you-
comments were about all of them.
Okay, because you brought up all of them, like, okay.
Okay, well, that was informational and you'll bring it back to us. So thank you. And administrative matters, anybody got a report? Anything they want to report?
Great admin retreat. I thought it was fantastic. I think there was a lot of camaraderie. I think the energy for the school year I felt there. I think the feedback from the tables was really positive of, you know, good things that we were learning about teamwork, which is going to be critical because CJ, you said it really best actually when you're opening. It wasn't like doing more with less. What was your wording though? It was like doing better or something like that. I'm butchering your line.
I don't know if I can remember it exactly.
It was brilliant.
What I was saying is we have kind of said since the budget reductions, and we are, I think, trained in education to say we do more with less, but I think through better teamwork, it's doing more better.
Yeah. There you go. Nailed it. So I thought it was great. It was great, you know, getting together with the team. That's my only update. I think it's the only thing since our last meeting.
I just have one more. Yeah, right. Management retreat. Thank you, the team for that. just a shout out and to thank the San Ramon Valley Education Foundation, who actually put on all the classes, right, the Imagineering classes this summer for our students, especially since we're not able, the district's not able to offer enrichment classes, right? And I know Rachel and I got to attend to the performance of Shrek, the theater class, and it is taught by two of our district teachers, right? Miss Heather Rains, my children had as a theater teacher at
Mine too.
yeah, yours too. And Jennifer Brown, right, who's a music teacher. So really, it was really fun performance and all age levels of the kids. So it was really, really cool. So again, really appreciate Education Foundation for supporting supporting not only district, but our students and families.
It was really nice how the two teachers introduced the performance and talked a little bit about the history of the theater program as part of the summer Imagineering, going back to the first one being done in a tent for COVID. And then they really highlighted three of the actors and the longevity that these students have had with the program, being associated with it every year. And it was just totally great about connection, and you could see just the interaction of the different ages. It was just a really beautiful example, and you could tell their heart and soul is in every moment of putting it on. They involved students in the stage production and the lights, and they acknowledged everybody's roles in it, which was just lovely. And Shrek was just amazing, and there were these three little piggies that were just darling. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, no, I just want to take a second to wish everyone the best of luck in starting the school year, whether you're a TKer stepping into a classroom for the first time, or a senior getting ready for your last greatest final year in San Ramon Valley Unified. All the teachers and staff and administration and everyone that makes that first day exciting for those kids. Thank you and good luck.
Happy back to school.